We're having technical problems.
We're-
Technical problems. No. I think it works, but it's gonna take a bit before it appears on YouTube. So let's see. Hello. Let's see if someone is. Yeah, 22 people, 23. Hello, guys. Hello, everyone. Hello, the world. I'm here
Hello.
with the goat,
The
Ziege. in German.
I can't make milk though.
Okay. So, for those who do not know who this guy is, this is Richard Simcott. Simply Richard Simcott, the goat and the king of languages. So please, Richard, introduce yourself for those who do not know you. I'm pretty sure everybody knows you, but just for the sake of presentations.
So my name is Richard Simcott. I run a website called Speaking Fluently and also the Polyglot Conference. I really like languages. I've been learning them since I was very small. And
like is an understatement.
they're okay. And I've been learning them. I continually learn new languages. And yeah, I mean, I particularly like indigenous, endangered, and vulnerable languages. And yeah, I've been learning them since I was about 5 and still learning new ones to this day. So yeah, Luca and I have known each other for a fair while now. We met through YouTube, in fact.
When did we get to know each other? 20 years ago? No, we're not that old.
YouTube isn't that old.
2008.
When
That's
was
the
it?
first time I watched
Was that the
his
first
video.
time?
Yeah, I watched this video and then I contacted him and then we got to know each other in 2010. And then the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it?
It's been a while. It's been more than 15 years. So let's get started, guys. I can already see a bunch of questions and a bunch of people saying good morning. I'm just going to, make some of your comments appear here. Hello. Hi. So the
Hello.
Jedi of language learning.
The Jedi.
The Jedi of language learning. Yassas. Diana's a student of my academy.
Yes.
She's been learning Greek for quite some time. So I'm going to explain how this is going to work very briefly. We're not here to talk about, we are here to talk about language learning, but mostly it's not just going to be a conversation between the two of us. It's going to be, we're going to be answering your questions. So if you have any questions, this is the moment to ask these questions. And I'm going to have the goat reply. And I'm just going to say a few things here and there and just add my own 2 cents, as they say, to the conversation. I'm not wearing glasses, so if you see me do this, it's because I have to see the questions. So you got a very nice comment here, Luca. I'm now a polyglot just because I watched one of your videos 8 years ago. That's very nice.
That's nice. Yeah,
it's very nice to hear. So this is Danish, but
Danish. Okay.
One more thing. You can ask if you want questions in different languages, but we're going to reply in English just because if we start speaking, say, Swedish, and nobody speaks Swedish, all of you are going to leave except the 2 people maybe who can speak and understand Swedish. That's the reason why we're going to reply in English. Now, I also have my iPad here so I can see the questions better.
There you
go. One important thing that I wanted to stress, we got some questions beforehand. That's the reason why I'm going to take a look on my phone, and we're going to reply to a couple of those questions, very interesting questions that were asked in the community tab. And let me check right now. Let's start with those ones. So, should you focus more on grammar or on the language itself when you start learning? So how much time do you spend learning grammar from the get-go when you start learning a language?
Oh, now, look.
Let's start with the easy questions.
Yes, start with the easy questions, of course. Now, I'm aware of the whole idea of comprehensible input, and I think it makes sense to really consume materials in the language, to hear it, to read it, to write it, to use it. Now, grammar is really a description of how the language works. So as far as I'm concerned, it gives you a nice overview. The thing that I think that where grammar maybe is a little bit problematic for many people who learn a language is that a lot of the terminology and the references are unknown. So it's sometimes, if that's your case, then it may not be that useful because you may be focusing so much on learning the grammar that it bores you to death and you don't learn the language. And in that case, I would say focus more on what you enjoy. If you don't enjoy the process of learning it in any way, shape, or form, you're not going to learn it. So whether it's grammar, not grammar, is by the by. For me personally, I do like to know how the grammar works. I also then look at how I can manipulate the grammar to say things that I want to say, and then also how it appears in things that I read, things that I hear, and I listen actively to when those parts of grammar appear, so that I can understand and sort of have it almost repeated in my head, and that just sort of strengthens the knowledge.
Excellent answer. The goat replied, we have an interesting question. Hey, do you guys have OnlyFans account? I'm asking for a friend. We were talking about OnlyFans before. Richard was asking, do you have an OnlyFans account, Lucino? oh boy.
No one wants to see that.
So which app out of the so many would you recommend to learn a language? They're asking you, and then I'm just gonna reply very briefly.
Which app?
If you've used any apps to learn languages, or I remember 15 years ago when we met in England, you were using a lot your iPad, but
was I?
Yeah, you were using it a lot, like to do stuff, to read, to listen.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you were using apps connected that. If there were actually apps back in the day, 15 years ago, about language learning.
There were a few things, but I mean, yeah. Do I use apps? I have done. I've played with apps. Do I use them all the time? No. I'm more of a course book and materials kind of person, really. So yeah, like Luca said, I use my iPad, but typically it's so that I can zone in on certain things. If I can't see them particularly well on the page, or if it's dark and I want to use it, I like to have my books on my iPad so that I can kind of zoom in and out and play with it that way. So I would probably say not so much. I did use Speakly to learn Estonian. I did a challenge a few years ago and studied Estonian for, in the end, a couple of months. But after the first month, I went on Estonian TV and gave an interview in Estonian. I couldn't do that now. My Estonian is basically very quickly in, even faster out, unfortunately. And the thing that I was most happy with, obviously, was not that I could use the language, but I was very focused on it for that month. And what I find with apps is typically you can be so focused on them that then you don't use anything outside it. So that can take up quite a lot of time. Or you could be stuck in on the whole winning streaks or whatever it is, or collecting coins, or the sort of gamification. And the gamification becomes more important than the actual language learning, which is kind of where my, I guess, interest really wanes. I get bored of that kind of thing. I will deliberately upset Duo on Duolingo, and I would make sure I break my streak at any given point so that I could just get a crying owl in my inbox.
My answer is going to be much more brief than Richard's. I used a little bit Speakly, but I think the only app I used in my language learning career is actually Langua, or Langua, whatever you want to call it. And I made a video about this three weeks ago, and I got to say it's a game changer for me, for my language skills, for my speaking skills. I think you guys, most of you have probably watched the video of me speaking multiple languages. Rewatch it again if you want. Take a look, because this app is amazing. But in general, I'm not an app fan for the same reasons that Richard stated. But for this app in particular, I'm just using it to speak, to have conversations. I get feedback. I'm jotting things down. It's just mind blowing. So in general, I would not recommend using apps, but if you like Duolingo, Babbel, etc., just by all means do that. That would be my answer.
I mean, I don't know this app. I've not used it before, but I do use ChatGPT, for example, and speak in different languages to ChatGPT, and get ChatGPT to actually give me information and to tell me things, and it's improved a lot with a number of languages. So even before I went to the conference in Malta, I was using it in Maltese, and just asking questions about Malta and getting like loads of nice sound in Maltese, and then written as well, obviously.
But you're interacting in within the chat.
No, speaking.
Oh, you were speaking. Okay, yeah. Because for those a few left of you who don't know, you can also use an app and you can directly talk. It got so much better recently. Now in Europe, you have the better version where you can speak, and you can even ask it to speak in different dialects. For example, you can ask him speak to me in English with an Indian accent, or with an American accent, or with a Scottish accent. It's just mind blowing. So ChatGPT is pretty cool, but there are also other apps in general. I think the biggest change, as far as I'm concerned, is not only Lingua, but also ChatGPT. Because what I'm doing right now with Turkish is I'm using ChatGPT. I will make a video about that upon request, and if you like it, where the difficulty for me at the beginning with Turkish was that not only is the syntax completely different, very similar to Japanese, and no wonder why Turks learn Japanese. It's easier for them to learn, and the other way around. But it was difficult for me to understand the grammar patterns. Even if I have the bilingual text, sometimes I got lost and I say, "What? This term has a weird endings," and I did not understand the function of the word within the sentence. And ChatGPT, you can simply ask, break this down for me and explain the grammar, and it does it perfectly well. So it really made it much easier, so much easier for me to understand the language. And ultimately, you start acquiring the language when you understand the text, you understand the content, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So that was a big change. We have a question in German. Richard is going to read it, and then unfortunately he has to reply in English, but
But you're going to read it for me because my eyes are not.
Mine are too. It's just like welche Sprache findet ihr persönlich am schönsten? Greetings from Vienna.
German.
German, of course.
German. So the question was, which language do you find the most beautiful? And for me, it's German. I've always loved German. I just like the way German is used, especially in a family environment, the way people speak to each other. I just love German. It always sounds friendly to me, and strange. I think it's because typically people don't think that, and I'm not sure I had the same opinion before I learned German, but it was certainly after my experience living in Germany and just how warm and friendly everyone was to me where I lived. I think now it just conjures up all of these lovely, warm, fuzzy memories that I have from my time in Germany. And so every time I hear it, it's like a blanket.
It's funny because a lot of people think that German sounds like a little bit of an aggressive language. This comes from stereotypes from World War II, etc. I also find German absolutely beautiful, but it's number two for me. For me, the most beautiful language is Greek. I was thinking about it today. I woke up at 5 and I said, okay, I'm tired because I was tired. I didn't sleep that well. And yet I hit the books. Like, it's still after 7 years, I still feel excited and motivated about sitting down and listening to this beautiful language. And I just can't get enough of it. The sound, the structure, it's just incredible. So for me, it's Greek, German, and then third is Russian. These three languages, I just love the structure, the language, the culture, etc., etc. But to each his own, as they say, right?
Indeed.
Okay, so let me get to another question. I am quick with, I guess it's written kith, but I'm quick with speaking a new language, but I struggle understand oral conversation. Struggle with understanding oral conversation. How could I improve? I could improve the best. Do you want to answer that one, or I answer?
Well, I mean, you're welcome to. I think it's not an easy thing to answer. Personally, I think it just takes a lot of practice, and I think listening, and if you can get the written documentation of how what the words are, so you get it transcribed, and then you listen a few times. Listening and getting used to listening to different varieties of a language can sometimes be challenging. On different topics can be challenging. Listening out for how you've learned it versus how it's said. So a lot of contractions. I think some of the things that Luca practices probably would help with that kind of thing when you're really listening to the language and practicing it, like your annotations that you do on the page to sort of hear where the stress is and where things are.
He's very well informed. He's a very well informed man.
I've watched him doing it so many times now.
I went like, oh my God, what is he doing?
Yeah, basically, I mean, I could just impersonate Luca from now on. I wrote most of his books, in fact.
Okay, so let's move to the next question. Now, this is a question from Z, but it's going to take, Z, whether you're a girl or a guy, could you please give me some tips for learning Turkish from scratch and also kanji? So these are two completely separate topics.
Okay.
I would say very briefly, because this is, you're opening a can of worms, as they say. We can talk for hours about this. My answer would be for Turkish, like any other language, but especially for Turkish, is to get a lot of input. I know this sounds very trivial, but, get a lot of input, stuff that you can understand. You can start with Asimil. He doesn't like Asimil, but it's not true. He doesn't like Asimil. It's not his favorite resource. Let's put it this way. You can use whatever resource you want, as long as you find the tools to understand. You got to get the tools to understand it. Because I was speaking with an American friend of mine. Maybe she's watching this live, and she said, "Hey, Luca, I learned Spanish was relatively easy, French, but Turkish, that's a different thing. And it's really difficult at the beginning. It's frustrating to understand at the beginning, even the structure of the language." I don't know if you had the problem as well, or for you it was like...
I mean, with Turkish, for me personally, I mean, I'm not a particularly good example because my home language is Macedonian, and we have over 6,000 Turkish words in the language. So that really helped in the beginning to be able to start using Turkish. I went to the Yunus Emre Institute and I studied it there. So I did the A1, A2, and B1 courses and sat the exams.
In 2 weeks.
Yeah, in 2 weeks. In a couple of years. It took a couple of years to learn Turkish to that level. And really, yeah, all of the lessons were just in Turkish. So we didn't have any other language used, except for when it got to understanding how mish works in Turkish, and then we were just given the comparison in Macedonian because we have the same idea, same concept. So otherwise, yeah, I agree with Luca. It's a lot of practice, a lot of listening. But yeah, I mean, I was doing it quite intensively. I had about 12 hours a week or so of lessons, and then I
thought it was 6 hours a day.
That was a lot. and then studying on my own as well. So yeah, it was a lot. But we also use Turkish as a community language, and so it's a language I've had to use. But yeah, I agree with Luca. I mean, what I found personally is that it's not so bad to have a basic conversation in Turkish, but once you get past a certain level, just the constructions and the way you have to flip things around gets a bit crazy.
It is. We're going to skip the question about kanji for now. Maybe we're going to talk about that at the end if we still have time, because we've got a lot of interesting questions here. We have a hello, Luca and Richard. Thanks for doing this live by Ceylonese polyglot who actually lives with me. He's in the other room, and he is Desh from Sri Lanka. He's got a very nice channel, guys. Just click on his channel and look. He's got very interesting stuff. And then we're going to go to Ka, I think, or call. I can't see without my glasses. Fear of speaking. My level is a solid B2, but I just cannot overcome the fear of speaking in DE. I guess it's in German. My Spanish level is much lower, but I have absolutely no issues with speaking it. But with German, I feel stuck. This is a question for the GOAT. So speaking. Why are people scared of speaking? Why are you not scared of speaking? This is an interesting thing that I wanted to show you guys. Richard is fearless, meaning even if he knows 3 words in the language, he will use those 3 words to talk to you, no matter where you are, no matter the circumstance. Something I am not able to do, because even with all my experience, I still feel sometimes that unless I speak a language to a certain degree, I still find it difficult to use the language on the go with whoever in every situation. So I've witnessed Richard do it in any circumstance across a wide range of languages. And I was just wondering, is it Richard that is different? Or did you develop this? Were you born like this? Did you overcome the fear of speaking? What's the story?
My personal
We're going to hear from the horse's mouth.
Or the goat's mouth, apparently.
Or in this case, is the goat and the horse.
When it comes to speaking, when it comes to anything, all I imagine is, we're all the same. when it comes down to it. I mean, no one's any better, no one's any worse than the next person. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, you have to make mistakes. Otherwise, how do you learn? And you have to kind of get things wrong, and you have to be misunderstood. Look, we're misunderstood in our own languages sometimes. And sometimes we find it frustrating to speak our own languages to express, our feelings or what we want to say or what we want to get across to somebody. And so, yeah, that's definitely an issue when you're learning a new language, because you have limited vocabulary and grammar, for example. But I mean, because we have it in every language, it doesn't mean we sort of stop and we don't express ourselves. Sometimes we need to kind of take stock, especially if we're emotional. We need to kind of take stock of how we feel and rein things in before we express ourselves. And I see the whole language thing as that. So it's less focusing on what I can't say and more focusing on what I can say. So sometimes, yeah, I may not want to say happy. I may want to say something different, but unfortunately, happy is the word I've got. So I have to kind of stick with it. I might want to say that, it's misty, but all I can say is it's kind of raining a bit. And so I just stick to what I can say. And does it matter that it's exactly right? Well, not really, no, because at the point of learning, you need to really consolidate that learning itself by practicing and getting it right. And you get it right by figuring out that people understand the message that you're saying. So you get confirmation from people. And also, once you've done that several times, that becomes kind of a solid thing in your brain that, yeah, I know that, I can just do that. Almost like when you hear a song many, many times, and then different parts of the song at different times, right? You might start singing when it gets to the chorus, but you still don't know the start of the song properly. And it's like that with language as well. And you can start then sort of introducing more nuances. So one day you may say, you know what, I actually wanted to say the word mist. It was misty. It wasn't rainy. It wasn't slight rain. It was mist. And you learn the word, and next time it's misty, you say, actually, it was misty. Or even if it was rainy, you say, actually, no, it was misty, because you want to practice the word. You don't have to worry about even lying. You can say what you want to say just to practice. And that's kind of how I see it. So yeah, I've never really worried about what people think or how they perceive me in terms of, whether I get things wrong or right. I mean, look, everyone gets things wrong sometimes, and people get things right sometimes. It's just human nature.
My 2 cents about this is that, and I wholeheartedly concur with everything that Richard said, is just that, like everything in life, if you are scared of something, you should just, not run away from it, but towards it. I know it's easier said than done, but once you really overcome your fears and you talk to someone, you realize it's no big deal, because at the end of the day, all our fears are here. When you talk to people, a lot of people will be grateful that you speak their language. They will be surprised. Some people are going to be, not that nice. It happens. But in general, people are going to love the fact that you speak their own language. So in that regard as well, I think these are fears that we all have when it comes to getting out of our comfort zone, because we live in a society where we get judged by, you have to perform, you have to do well, etc. And we have, absorbed unconsciously these patterns.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting you said about being judged. I mean, you're going to be judged anyway, whether we like it or not. So True. You may as well give it your best shot. True. Because otherwise the other judgment, if you don't try, is, they didn't speak to me. So what's going on psychologically for the person you're trying to speak to? Well, they might have all sorts of other concerns going on in their own lives. Oh, maybe they thought I smelt. Maybe they thought I don't dress well enough. Maybe they didn't like my appearance. Maybe they didn't like something I said. Maybe they didn't understand, or maybe and all these different maybes are going around in their heads too. Remember that you're talking to another human being. So the judgments then go backwards and forwards constantly. And until we just speak clearly and just say what we want to say and give it our best shot.
Well said.
Never know.
Well said. But my question to you is, were you born like this, meaning fearless, or like in the sense that I think I've known you for 15 years, and the question there's a question and I've been thinking about recently is that when people talk about being extroverts and introverts, do you think these categories exist? Because there's a lot of talking about, I'm an introvert. So for me, speaking with people is really difficult. I got a lot of questions like, I'm an introvert. I spend most of my time in my apartment, and then I don't venture out and talk to people. So you think it's a structural problem? It's a nature versus nurture, or is just like both in a way?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't want to kind of mess with people's identities and say, introverts or extroverts exist or don't exist. But I do think that it's a lot more nuanced than just saying I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert.
Yes.
I think that there are times when one individual could be perceived or could even feel more extroverted or more introverted, just depending on what's happening at any given time in their lives. And so, is it one thing? I would say probably not. I think that people are just too multifaceted to be put into these little boxes constantly. And I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. Usually when it comes to how someone presents one day, they may actually present a completely different way another day. You just never know. And I think that for me personally, I've never really had an issue with talking to people. If I don't feel like talking, I'll actually just say, you know what, I'm pretty tired. I'll give a reason, but sometimes I do need some alone time to myself, and I'm not just constantly chatting to everyone, even though sometimes it can seem that way.
It depends.
Depends. But I do definitely enjoy a lot of the interactions I have, and I mean, that's an important part of the learning process, not just for languages, but for many other topics. And I like to ask people open questions. That's another thing, actually. If you're scared of speaking, ask open questions and listen to the responses. People often like to talk about themselves. So if you ask somebody, okay, so what do you do for a living? And just carry on drilling down with the open questions, not yes, no. And then if you don't understand something, say, oh, could you just say that again? What was that you said? Or, so I mean, if I want to ask Luca, so Luca, what do you like to do on a Saturday normally?
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I wanted to say is that
he's ignoring my question. See, don't be afraid to call him out on his rubbish as well.
What is it that I wanted to say? I wanted to say something now, I forgot. Richard was talking about the fact that people are multifaceted, and I totally agree. I never thought about introvert, like the category of being introverted or extroverted, because in my life, I'm talking about me, of course, sometimes I'm very outgoing and I talk to everybody. It really depends on the circumstance. Sometimes I'm a little bit shy, and sometimes people are a little bit surprised. Oh, Luca is shy. Yeah, I'm shy because I can be shy in situations where I feel uncomfortable. I don't know somebody or whatever. I'm not in the mood. So I think that it's dangerous. It's also kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy to lean too much into hey, I am in this box, because once you put yourself in that box, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. This happened because I'm an introvert or I'm shy. I think when it comes to speaking, experience, like facing your fears and experience, the more experience you get, the easier it is. I like thinking that speaking another language is living, again, multiple lives, multiple situations through a different lens.
Yeah.
Right? So, for example, when you were a little kid, maybe for the first time when you were 5 or 6, you went to the shop and bought something for yourself, okay? Or you went to school. Then when you learn a new language, if you think about it, we're scared more. Yes, we're scared of using the language, but we're also scared about the fact that the situation is we're not comfortable with the fact that the situation is new. I have to buy a ticket. I've never done that before. I have to, I don't know, whatever, And that's the reason why I was so impressed when we met in Poznan, because you've been learning Polish for some time, and of course you knew another dozen Slavic languages, but it was difficult for me to order stuff. He loves doing that. He just goes to places and talks to people. For example, someone, it is just, I think the fact of buying something is just the start of a longer conversation. He likes interacting so much, something I do not enjoy that much, especially when I don't speak the language that much. And that goes to show that everyone is different. We're all different.
Yeah, it's actually something interesting that you said there as well about personality. People often ask about whether or not different languages people have different personality when they speak a different language. And I think that the lens thing is very heavily connected to that. How you behave and how you act when you speak one language versus another language, you're going to be viewed different through that different cultural lens. And so people will react differently to you based on their cultural norms, right? So then what happens in turn, you react differently than you would in the other language. So you have a feeling that you're almost like a different person. And this is why I always say I don't believe we're different people. I just think that different facets of our personality are kind of enhanced or just magnified by the lens, the new cultural and linguistic lens of a new language.
Very well said. Very well said. Well, let's move on. We have another question in that vein from Diana, but we talked about this fear of speaking and making mistakes. We haven't talked about making mistakes, but we're going to touch upon that a little bit later. Let's move on to the next question. I still have to lean towards the screen because I can't see anything. I'm thinking about learning Russian by reading. Galveri says, or Golveri, do you think that buying an ebook reader like Kindle would be a good investment? I will let Richard answer, and I'm going to get my Kindle to show you what I was doing just before Richard arrived here. So I'm just going to give you a demonstration of what you can do with a Kindle.
Hi, Luca.
Bye. Hey guys, I'll see you in a couple of hours.
Okay, so now it's the Richard show. Well, I mean, I actually had a Kindle, like a proper Kindle, the sort of the one that looks like paper many years ago. I didn't find that particularly appealing, if I'm honest. But what I do like is the Kindle app on my iPad. And I like it because, first of all, it's in color. I can look at the page and zoom in a lot more than you can on a regular Kindle. You can make the text larger, but with this, you can kind of like zoom in on lots of different things, which I actually personally really like. I like that dynamic nature of, sort of using your fingers to do this. I find it just makes things a little bit more exciting for me, and kind of the inner child, I guess, when it comes to that. Luca's got the one that I've just said doesn't work for me.
So it doesn't work for you? Interesting.
I just said it's not bad. It's just that it didn't excite me so much. Okay,
so I gotta tell you the truth. The Kindle, I use it when I travel because I like having, carrying too much stuff is difficult, and this is what makes it so much easier to read a bunch of books. Now, this is the interesting thing. Let's suppose that you're reading a book in a language that you still do not speak well, right? This is very common because a lot of people, I believe, make the mistake. Maybe it's not a mistake, but they jump directly from, say, a language resource for beginners, and then they go like, "Hey, I'm reading a book and I don't understand anything. Why is that?" Now, I was saying before that for me, the most important thing, and this is why we live in a fantastic time, we have all the tools to make the incomprehensible comprehensible very fast. Now, I don't know if you know, but let's suppose that you know that on a Kindle, let's see if you can see it. I think the camera has to readjust. So on a Kindle, this is a book in Spanish. On a Kindle, what you can do is that you can, for example, you can click on a word and you can see the meaning of the word, right? Let's suppose that I clicked on a random word I cannot see, era, no? So it says, it explains this in Spanish. Now, this is okay, but then you have to click, you have to look, and you have to, understand, is this the meaning within that context or not? So what you can do, and this is pretty interesting, you can basically use, I think I made a video about this. So you have, for example, the Google icon. You can see here, you click on the Google icon, and then you can see this camera here, camera icon. So I'm just going to click on that, and you can see now that I have Google Lens. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show it to you. Hopefully this works. I'm just going to take a picture, right, of the text. You see here? You should be able to see. Well, I'm going to show you the result. So I'm going to take a picture of the text itself. You can see it selected the text. And then what you can do is that you can translate it. Here, it's from Spanish into Italian. It's set up to Italian. And then you can listen to it.
Il freddo. Penso che non ci sia sensazione più terribile del freddo quando lo si soffre in acqua. Noti come I tuoi muscoli si contraggono. Come le
So
tue dita smettono di rispondere a
instead of looking at the text in Italian, looking at the text in Spanish, which is terrible, I just listen to the text in Italian while I read it in Spanish. This is just an example. I will not use it for Spanish, but it could for if it's a language that I don't know that well.
Mhm.
The great thing about this is that it translates the text in context. So, and it really understands it really well. Now,
Mhm.
Spanish, Italian, they're relatively close, but it does a great job, and it sounds very natural now. They improved a lot. So, to make a long story short is that you got to try to see if you like it, and then you got to get the tools in order for you to enjoy it. Because if you try to read that word by word, oh man, it's going to be a long ride. So what you want to do is you try it. Do you like it? Great. You don't like it? You try something else. But if you try this, I highly recommend you use Google Lens, which by the way, you can use it with also with a book, just kind of page. So whether it's a Kindle or a book, you can use it, and it's great. It makes the incomprehensible comprehensible very fast.
Yes, it does indeed.
So let's move on to the next one. We have our friend Alex. Which linguist, polyglot, or language lover has had the biggest influence on you? ¿Por qué? Linguist, polyglot, or language lover?
It's got to be Luca Lampariello.
Of course.
Because he's here. No,
I guess you're the biggest polyglot I know in this room.
He's definitely the most important polyglot in this
In
room.
this room right now.
Right now.
The last 10 minutes.
Honestly, I don't know. If I'm very honest, I don't know. I don't know if there's one person. I think there are different people that I find inspiring for different reasons. One such person is someone like Judith Meyer, for example, who I just love that she learned Greek because she wanted to.
Judith Meyer, so that people know.
Yeah.
Judith. Well, hopefully, I'm not going to misspell it. Judith
Meyer.
There you go. Tell them who she is because they don't know.
So Judith Meyer, she is a Berlin-based polyglot, and she has studied a number of languages, and she wrote the script hacking books for Teach Yourself. So if you see any Teach Yourself script hacking, she's the brains behind that method. And yeah, with Judith, the thing that I just think is fascinating is that she's got not just this sort of linguistic knowledge, but she's got all of these other skills that she has developed over many years and worked very hard to develop, including sort of tech stuff. She codes, she does all sorts of stuff that I could never understand. And during the economic crisis in Greece, she was interested in understanding what the difference was between what was being reported on in Germany compared to Greece. So she learned Greek to be able to read and follow the news in Greek. And she started communicating with people in Greece about it, including Yanis Varoufakis. And she ended up joining in with him and working with him on the DiEM25 movement. And I thought just what she's achieved and what she's done with such different goals for learning language than most of us normally have. I find that quite inspiring. So yeah, I think Judith is probably the one where she stands out quite a lot. But I mean, a lot of other people for different reasons, but I think Judith because she's done something that is just so far away from my reality and what I can do that I can only admire her.
As far as I'm concerned, I admire a bunch of people, including this one polyglot here. But I have to say that one of the people who impressed me the most is Lom Kato. I don't know if you ever heard of Lom Kato, Kato Lom, or they say Lom Kato because she's Hungarian and they invert the name and the surname. And I read her book, How I Learn Languages. One of the things that impressed me the most was where she said that the Russians, 1945, there was a siege in Budapest, so we're attacking, of course, because the Russians were coming, were conquering Eastern Europe first. And they were bombing Budapest. It was mayhem because the Russians against the Nazis, etc. And she wrote in her book that she kept reading Russian every single day while the city was being bombed. Talking about consistency. We think about our world where we sit here comfortable in our places, and she was learning Russian day by day, hour by hour, even when she was being, not her, the entire city was being bombed. So apart from this one episode that struck a chord with me, her book is great, and her philosophy of language learning, I really like it. There's not a lot of interviews, unfortunately, on the internet, and there's a few in Hungarian. One in particular has English subtitles. Kato Lombo, Long Kato interview. You can write it. It's just inspiring what she says, how she faces the whole language learning. Another great quote is, learn grammar from language and not language from grammar. This is another one that I really like because you can learn the grammar of the language. As far as I'm concerned, you always learn the grammar together with the language. There's never learning just grammar for the sake of learning grammar. This is my it's been my experience. I think it's been everybody's experience of those who learn languages successfully, right? Yeah. So there's many other people we admire within the language learning realm, but I'd say Kato Lom is the one who inspires me the most for a number of reasons. Here we have Miki. Hi, Miki. These are students who say hi to each other, students from the school. This is an interesting question from Idzba. Let me just get this a little bit closer. Otherwise, I really can't see anything. I got to go see a doctor. How many hours a day should one listen to a language at minimum when learning it? How many hours a day? It's not how much time, but how many hours? How many hours a day? It's Idzba. Idzba asked this question. Hours? Minutes?
It's difficult. Look, I mean, there are things you've got to be aware of when you're talking about how many hours you listen. If you don't understand it, it's not comprehensible input that you're listening to. You've got to be very careful that your brain doesn't turn the language into white noise. What I mean by that is when your brain doesn't understand something, or when it's something it's not interested in, what will happen is it will turn the language or whatever it is into white noise. It won't pay attention to any of the details, what's going on. So you may as well just have a cow mooing in the background. You need to be doing something a bit more active when you're learning it. So I would say some sort of activity. So you're listening out for words you're focusing in and trying to pick out the bits that you understand. You're listening for the porosity of the language, for example, these kinds of things, or you're trying to repeat after the speaker when they're speaking. But if you just put it on in the background and you're not doing anything really with it, and it's just there as noise, it could turn into white noise. So it's important to do it as often as possible. But yeah, make sure you don't make the language turn into white noise.
Okay. As far as I'm concerned, I would say the more you listen, the better, but you have to listen something you understand. Again, if you don't understand it, it's just in the background, it's not going to make a dent. I would say. So how many hours? It really depends on you. I can tell you my experience. When I'm a beginner, I tend to listen and read a lot, but for like maybe 30 minutes, maybe a little bit less than that, because at the beginning it's quite taxing. You don't know the language that much. And then I scale it up. The better I become at understanding, then the more I can listen. I can listen for an hour, 2 hours. When you get to a point where you can listen to the language without using a script as a reference, that's a moment where you can really you can do it even before that. I enjoy listening to something I can understand at least, like, let's say at 60%. If I understand less than that, it's not enjoyable for me. And, I tend to think about something else and get distracted. So I always spend, let's say 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 1 hour listening while reading every day for maybe a year until I get accustomed to the language. I know the language well enough so that I can venture into unknown ground and start listening to things maybe aimed at intermediate learners that I can understand by myself, and I listen while running some errands or doing other things. And the amazing thing is that the more you start understanding, the more the language, you're absorbing the language. This is the moment where things scale up and you get familiar with the language because it goes in the back of your mind. You don't think about it anymore. You're acquiring the language rather than studying or trying to learn the language.
Yeah, and then it comes to a point where you're actually just enjoying the content in the language. It's not the language itself that's necessarily the thing that you're you're doing. But if I think about social media now, for me, with TikTok or Instagram or whatever, a lot of it will be comedy or information or cute things that, about cats usually. But I will typically consume things like that in a variety of languages, and it's just for the enjoyment. There's no real time that I set myself, but and now with the algorithms understanding what you understand, that just happens naturally. I don't even need to look out for a lot of things. I just get a natural feed of lots of languages, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. So podemos hacer preguntas en español también, Paul. Can we ask questions in Spanish? Of course, you can ask questions in Spanish, but we'll answer in English for the reasons we stated before. Otherwise, everybody, all the people who don't speak Spanish are going to leave the room. Someone said, I don't like, this is not a question, it's more like a statement. I don't know, Irina, why you made this statement. It's interesting. I don't like how Portuguese sounds. Fair enough. Some people like it. Some people like it. Some people don't.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't like something, don't do it. That's the only thing. I mean, there's not.
It's pretty simple.
I mean, I don't like vanilla ice cream, so I'm not going to eat it. So.
It makes total sense, right? Yeah. Someone asked, do you offer any coaching services? We both do at the Smart Language Learning Academy. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but I'm going to post a link of Richard's page and then of my page. Basically, we offer coaching services, but they're slightly different.
Yeah,
Richard, what is it that you do?
So I do a few things. I do like language coaching, but I also do language learning therapy. I'm very much in the camp of we actually need to have the right mindset to be able to do it. And sometimes the issues that we face, particularly now, this time of year, we imagine, we start a new language because it's the new year. It's a typical thing to do. But then we end up being very disappointed or demotivated, or that it's not going as we imagined. And sometimes that can be enough to stop us from learning. And actually, it's from my point of view, more of a discussion about your life cycle and how that fits in with the language learning. So it's all well and good people asking questions about how many hours do you do this or what do you do with that. But my answer is going to be generic and will be for my life. But actually, when it comes to learning languages, it's very much what's important for you as an individual. And so I kind of realized that, yeah, I mean, I could give all the advice until the cows come home, but if it's not the exact advice that is right for you and for your life and your situation, then you may not take it in as exactly that. So what I try to do is make that the big thing, and I obviously can create that to be for specific languages as well, so that we look at specific resources that you could use and stuff. But to make sure that you are fully capable of just going and doing any language you want afterwards.
Excellent. I posted, as you can see on the screen, you can click on that link that I posted on the chat if you want to take a look at the page where, Richard offers these services. You'll find much more info there. Thank you for the answer. Very, very clear. We got a lot of interesting questions that I was going through while Richard was talking. Someone said, this is not a question. Hey, this is still our friend in the other room, actually. It's Desh. So how many hours a day should one listen? We already talked about that. This is an interesting one. So someone said, why don't you learn South African languages? It would be nice to hear you all speaking in Zulu, for example. Have you ever learned any or tried your hand at any African language, Swahili maybe?
Yeah, Swahili, yeah, I mean, I did a language learning challenge. And look, my view on this, and I take on sort of learning languages, is that I like to explore as many as possible. It's enjoyable. But if you're going to take any language genuinely seriously and speak it well and use it, you really need to have it as part of your life. And the reality is that there are no Zulu speakers in the Balkans that I've ever met. or of other languages that I would like to. I really would like to learn Tswana, for example. I found the people in Botswana to be extremely friendly, and I really enjoyed visiting the country, and I would love to learn. But then reality bites when you get home, because you realize I bought some books to learn something, and then reality bites, you get home and you don't hear it, you're out of the context. And what I typically do is I will learn languages that I have a link to. Sometimes I'll explore languages that I don't have a link to, but the languages that typically stay with me for a longer period of time are the ones I have a link to, whether that's because they're from the Isles where I originate, or from parts of Europe that I go to, or the languages that I get to hear for work, for projects, with friends, family. That's the kind of thing that I typically do. So yeah, exploring Swahili for a couple of months was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. My teacher was wonderful. I recorded all the lessons and put them on YouTube for anybody interested in learning some Swahili as well. But is it realistic for me to be learning lots of languages from places that are so far away that I don't have the same contact? In the future, maybe. For now, it's just not practical for me.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. This is one for Richard. Which language does Richard consider himself the strongest in, except for English, obviously?
I was going to say English.
British English.
It's difficult to say. I really find that a difficult question. I would say there are probably, including English, 6 languages that I feel, strongest in. My home language of Macedonian, of course, and French, Spanish, German, Dutch, I would say. And then there are other languages I can also, do fairly well in, I'd say. But those ones are ones that I've lived, breathed, and had as home language.
And tasted.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. Let's go back to the question about idols. Idols, I don't know. Myths. Qual è il vostro idolo? 1. Idolo poliglotta, e 2. L'antidolo. This is interesting. O youtuber conosciuto per l'apprendimento delle lingue. So, what's this? Ray Blay asks, who's your polyglot idol? We already addressed that question. Who's your anti-idol? I can answer that. If you don't have, I don't know if you have any.
I can't think.
I can tell you. I can tell you. I don't have any. I don't like talking negatively about people. This is not in my nature. I wouldn't call him anti-idol, but I'm telling you now, I wanted to make a reaction video about one infamous video that is on the internet, and that is called, I don't remember exactly the title, but it's about a guy who's called Ziad Fazah, and he made a video in a TV show called Viva el Lunes, and I don't want to. I don't want to slander the guy. I don't want to talk ill about the guy. I'm just saying that when it comes to speaking multiple languages, the one thing that I think is really relevant is that learning foreign languages is a humbling experience. Every time you learn a new language, every time you discover something new, you thought, oh, I mastered that language. There is no such thing as mastering a language. It will never happen, not even your native language. And it's a humbling experience. And what I did not like is not the fact that he couldn't speak the languages. And I understand it's really difficult. In a TV show, it's difficult. It's already difficult to speak a foreign language. Imagine the pressure. Everyone's looking at you. So I understand why he was sweating, and it was difficult. And also understand that he hadn't practiced these languages in 30 years or something. But on the other hand, I disliked when he said, I got a divine talent and I speak all the languages in the world. It's for him, it's just 60. There's 6,000 languages. But I think for me, it was more like, again, the fact that the lesson I've learned indirectly is that when it comes to language learning, it's not even you have to be humble. If you're not humble, languages are gonna punish you in a way, and the rest of the world is gonna punish you with the languages. This is what the thought that's this question spawned. You've watched the video. We commented as well.
Yeah, I mean, Look, I'm going to say I don't know the guy. I've never spoken to him. I like to try and play devil's advocate though as well.
Yes.
And so I'm going to try and play devil's advocate a little bit. I can imagine, and I've heard Christians, because I understand he's Christian. I've heard Christians use the term "it's a divine gift" or "it's from God." I don't know if it's always meant to be a kind of I'm this much better. I think it's more I give the praise to God, and so it's not me doing this; it's God who's done this.
Yeah.
And I think probably in his mind, I understood that to mean that. It's just that when it's said, sometimes it can come across to a lot of people as sounding a little arrogant.
Yes. Well, that's about it. So let's move on to the next question. Let's go Russian speak. I don't know what this means. So let's go to, could you talk about your experience learning Mandarin? Oh, that opens a can of worms too. Let's go to this question. Marty Likausi is a future student of mine. Do you recommend using shadowing to improve speaking? What is it that you do? These people want to know to improve your pronunciation first. How do you get so good at pronouncing languages? So, and the second one is, do you use shadowing, or have you heard of shadowing? Of course you have. Ça va sans dire. Have you used? have you tried shadowing in your career? In your long language learning career. Long career.
Well, yeah, I know shadowing. I know what it is. I don't practice it necessarily as kind of a main staple of what I do. But I will repeat after things that I hear, kind of like polyparrot.
Polyparrot.
Yeah, like
polyparrot.
Kind of a child that sort of repeats things, and
they call me the polyparrot.
Yeah,
yes.
And a child will do that very often as a game,
Yes.
or to annoy you. Basically, trying to annoy family, friends, parents, whatever, and they'll just repeat. Try and say it before, anticipate what you're going to say, even. And I will play that game sometimes, like to myself, not when I'm speaking to another person, because that would be extremely rude. So yeah, in that sense, I'll play polyparrot. But so I don't necessarily do it as with other people, but sometimes I might do it. For example, particularly I like doing it with songs, singing along with music and things like that. But I don't know if that really helps with my pronunciation. I just think I'm going to get things wrong with pronunciation, and people are going to look and say, what are you talking about? And I will listen to how people say things. I will try and repeat sounds that I find difficult, particularly. But do I do anything in particular? If I'm very, very honest, no, I don't. I just listen, repeat, and I get as close as I can, so that it sounds as authentic as it can possibly be for accurate pronunciation. The accent thing isn't actually something I really work on necessarily. But at university, what we did for Swedish, we spent an entire year listening to Swedish, particularly pairs of I don't even know what it is.
Onden. It's called accent 2 and accent 1, and
so we'd listen to this and pairs of sounds that would sound similar, for example, like long and short vowels, whatever else, and we'd have to then try and produce them and record our voices. And we'd listen to the original, listen to our own recording, and then see how we were. Then we'd get feedback from a teacher, and the teacher would then say, oh, well, actually, you need to have your tongue placed here or there in the mouth, or the air's coming out of this part of your mouth, or you feel vibration, you don't feel a vibration. This kind of thing where you actually get physical feedback on how it should be for you and how you should feel when you're saying it is quite useful. There are certain sounds that you can give very specific tips to say, actually, if you think you're saying this sound, but you actually say another sound comes out. I always remember this with the U in French, where you pierce your lips, and you can put a pen in your mouth, for example, in French and German. Put a pen in your mouth, tighten your lips around the pen. Pull the pen out and say E in English. And it comes out as an U.
Yes.
And this is something that you can practice to kind of get this. But the teacher would have some of those things, but also the sort of how you position your mouth, and then would also then listen to you do it again and again and again and again and again. As I say, we did this for a year for Swedish because there were a lot of sounds. Excellent
answer. And I would just give you my 2 cents. Like Richard, and contrary to what a lot of people think, I don't work on my pronunciation, meaning that much. I don't spend hours trying to fix every single sound, etc. What I do is I listen a lot, but most of all, I think what really makes a difference is the psychological aspect of wanting to sound like, maybe not like a native, but you want to embrace the culture, you want to embrace another tribe, so to speak. I think this is what makes a difference. When people ask me, "Oh, you have to have the absolute ear, you have to have, it's not the ear, it's the brain, and it's your attitude towards the language." I remember when I started learning English, I was watching a ton of American movies, and after each movie, I was reciting the lines, line by line. I just wanted to sound like that actor, feel like that actor. I would just blend in the American culture. So I was not just trying to imitate the sounds, sure, and I was also getting some things wrong, and my American friends said, "No, you don't pronounce it this way, this is wrong," etc. But I think it's the at the end of the day, it's your desire to sound like a native, or to belong to a different culture, to embrace another culture. That's the one thing I would say, and I'll conclude, and then you can get back to me about that. There's one funny episode I wanted to tell you. It's true that in general, again, you listen to the language, you want to sound good, etc. But there are some languages that have a different sound structure. When I started learning Mandarin Chinese, which has tones. So, for example, let's take a syllable. Ma is the first tone. You have ma. It's like a tone that rises. Then you have ma. I guess you can hear the difference for those who don't speak Mandarin. And then you have ma. It's a falling tone. So all these syllables have these 4 tones, plus there's a neutral tone. And I remember when I started learning, I was so passionate about getting things right, because Mandarin Chinese has this kind of obstacle at the beginning, especially because it's not taught well. It's taught the traditional way that I was going around. And I was like pronouncing these things like the polyparrot. But together with that, I was constantly doing like ma. And I was doing this with my hand, the hand gesture. I sat down, it was like a Sunday morning. I was at a lunch, sit down and start doing this. My father goes crazy. He goes, "What are you doing?" I did that for 10 minutes. My father was exasperated, and I just realized, okay, this is too much. But I was so into these Mandarin tones that I was doing blah 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 blah, etc. Anyway.
If you're into tones, actually, Stu J. Raj has created these that are really, really good website for this kind of thing. So if you're into this kind of thing and you want feedback on that, he's got the name of the website, great tools.
You sent it
Language
to me,
Fundamentals, I think it's called.
Let me see if I can find them. Language
Fundamentals.
Yeah,
and he's got if you watch the video in the beginning on that page, it explains how to use it, but he does it for like pretty much almost any language you can even imagine.
Is this it? Let me see. Providing exceptional speech therapy patients experience. No, that's not that. Maybe if I write Stu J. Ray.
Yeah, Stu J. Ray.
Anyway, Stu J. If we find it.
And he basically, I mean, if you look for him on YouTube as well, he's got his J Academy and stuff as well.
I think it's this one. I'm not sure.
I think it might be on that one.
But this is a blog, but I think this is the website. Okay. We're gonna share it with the rest of the gang.
But he's got a great site for this kind of thing, and to get feedback and to see how it is, and you can actually see what sounds you're making compared to how it should be, with colors and graphs and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool. So yeah, I mean, you've got things like that. But I was going to say, actually, while you were talking, you made me think. Sometimes, even if you don't get the pronunciation exactly right, or the accent exactly right, if you get the porosity of the language more or less right, it's amazing how speakers of the language's brains will autocorrect what you're saying. and sometimes they won't hear the mistakes as well. So I remember when I was in Czech Republic, when I was living with the family, and they'd say to me, "Oh, you get all the cases exactly right." And I'm like, "I absolutely do not. I know I don't." And they went, "Well, we've never heard you make a mistake." I'm like, "You're probably just not listening well enough." But I didn't say that, obviously. I just said thank you and kind of moved on. But I knew that wasn't correct, because I knew that I was kind of on the kind of yellow light, the amber light. I didn't quite know on the traffic light whether I was getting it quite right. So I fluffed it. But because I sounded okay when I spoke, I think they auto-corrected it.
This is an excellent point. I think prosody, prosody is a nice word for intonation, how, the tone of your voice fluctuates. This is really important when I train people, used to train, but I still do it. When I train people in getting their pronunciation right. Pronunciation is just a part. Pronunciation actually means how you produce the single sounds. Intonation is at the core of the language. And if you get the intonation right, it speaks directly to the heart of people, and they will listen to that and forget about all the small details and all the small mistakes. And
yeah, that's and that's exactly why, for example, if you think of a song that you want to find, and you can hum it, you can now do that online, right? You can do that with Google. I think it has this option where you can hum a song, and as long as you get it close enough, it will understand which song it is, and it will find it for you.
Damn right. That's damn right.
Yeah.
Speaking of inflections and cases, you were saying that you were getting some cases wrong, but people wouldn't care because your intonation in Czech was great. Juan Torres asks, how do you guys suggest we should approach grammar cases and inflections? Which is, there are a few people ask the same question. So grammar cases, let's suppose that someone wants to learn Czech, Polish. I think Bulgarian, Macedonian don't have cases, right?
No.
So let's say Czech, Polish, Ukrainian, Russian, and you find it difficult to get these cases right. What do you do to improve your cases? The inflections, not only the cases, but also the verbs, perfective, imperfective, etc.
Yeah, that's a completely different story, the imperfective and perfective
It's
verbs.
true. Let's talk about cases. Let's not make things complicated.
Yeah, with the case systems. So typically people would learn these case tables, right? And I'm not going to poo-poo the value in actually knowing those, so that you can explain to somebody for teaching purposes or yourself. And I mean, if you ask any Icelandic child, for example, "Oh, how do you do it?" They'll go down the entire table of how it all declines. But when it comes to doing this for me, I'm going to go back to what Luca said before and say I think language usage over grammar. So learn it as you need it. And so, for example, how do you say by bus or by taxi or by train or by plane or whatever else? You learn them just as a kind of a pattern that you can switch in and out like language blocks. And I think the patterns do emerge with these things, and the exceptions really learn them when you need them, I think, because you can get very bogged down very quickly, and it can get extremely overwhelming if you start trying to learn all of these tables for every single type of eventuality. Because if you think about it like this, if you learn all these tables and you're learning all these eventualities, you might spend an equal amount of time learning about 3 words that you probably will never use.
That's absolutely true. And in my case, I would say that this almost derailed my attempt of learning Russian. Back in the day, I studied Russian in 2004, and I made the blunder. It was a blunder. I made the mistake of buying a huge grammar book that had all these tables, and it looked that it was the first Slavic language I had ever learned. I thought, this ain't never going to happen. But then I told myself, do I really need this grammar book? And then I just, threw it away. Actually, it's still somewhere there, but I wanted to burn that book. And I never used it. I think I speak Russian well. I get cases right. Sometimes I get them wrong. But, there's this obsession with perfection. You will never get these damn cases right all the time, even if you speak the language fluently. Slavic languages are really complex from a grammatical standpoint. And if you make the odd mistake, or if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world, as long as people understand you, right?
And shock horror, people who speak the language also make mistakes.
Of course.
They're not No one's a perfect speaker of the language. I mean, if you say to people, "Oh, do you make mistakes with cases?" Often they'll say, "No, no, no, never." But the reality is quite different. I mean, it's not something they like to admit, but it happens.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Someone said, this is our friend Alex, who's pestering us, the goat and the bull. He calls me the bull. He's my colleague, so he's making fun of us. And yeah, that's the same guy. Richard, are you focused on making Macedonia great again? This is another one.
No comments.
No, let's
No
not.
comments.
Let's not
No
talk
comments.
about. Let's not talk about that, especially if we're in Greece, and not only. So, okay, do you have plans on learning Japanese? I think you've learned. You tried your hand at Japanese, right?
Yeah, I studied it for a semester or so at university in Sweden, at the University of Dalarna, and I did it because I was studying Chinese. I was studying Mandarin Chinese, and I was really interested to know how the kanji worked in Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
And people would explain it to me, but it's not the same until you've actually studied it yourself. And what I decided was it's really hard.
It's easy, like it's really hard. Let's drop it.
Yeah.
It's the easiest.
And there are like zero Japanese people in the Balkans anyway. So no, one day maybe I'll go back to it. But I learned enough to be able to kind of get by in sort of shops or to ask the way and order things and stuff in Japan for the Polyglot conference in Fukuoka. But that was kind of as far as I took it. I mean, I still remember that, but yeah, I mean, I don't speak Japanese.
Okay, fair enough. For me, it's the same. It's very difficult. I find it difficult to learn. I will go back to it, but sometimes the problem with learning languages like Japanese is that if you're trying to learn and maintain 15, 20, 25 languages, you got to make choices.
Yeah.
And my choice depends on the amount of time I get to use a language. So for example, for me, Hungarian is much more useful as of now than Japanese because I don't have Japanese friends. I don't know when I'm going to go to Japan. And there's not a lot of Japanese people you can find around the corner and talk to. Well, Hungarian is still not the easiest language to practice in Italy, but still it's 2 hours. Like I just hop on a flight and I'm in Budapest, which happened. So for me, it's like, it's not just an intellectual pursuit. It's also, hey, I want to use these languages with real people, Hey, why am I learning Turkish? Because you get to talk to Turkish people all the time, everywhere. They're everywhere, especially in Berlin, in Berlin, in Germany, but not only here too. So Turkish for me is much more useful than Japanese. And I have to make choices, Bandwidth is limited, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have, language simp. Wow, two of the smartest and most handsome men in the same live stream. Yes, language
Well,
simp.
if you were here, it just highlight it and elevate it that bit better.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Damn right. Ali Reza asks how to use correct grammar when speaking. Oh, this is a good one. Let me just briefly address this. You cannot think about grammar if you're speaking. Like the brain, or better, you can, but then you're thinking more about grammar than communication. So for me, it's always, we use the Smart Language Learning Academy, we use the acronym COP. COP is communication over performance, meaning that if you focus on communication, it's much better to speak Tarzan-like. For example, I eat apple tomorrow. Just better saying, I eat apple tomorrow. You perfectly understood what I wanted to say. I train tomorrow. You understand perfectly what I want to say, rather than not saying anything or trying to get everything perfectly. So in my book, trying to think about getting everything right, the grammar right, does not work. Stephen Krashen talks about this. The more you get the language in you acquire it, the easier is going to get to produce the language without thinking about grammar,
Yeah.
It's a very short answer. I could talk about this for hours, but
yeah, I mean, also that there's a weird irony actually here, that with most languages, I think probably, actually, when you say get the grammar right, what do we actually mean? We usually refer to getting the grammar right compared to against the standardized form of the language, right? And that's normally a literary form of a language. Well, most languages actually have an oral form that's not standardized in the same way, but is commonly accepted as that's the way we say it. So if you were talking about French, for example, the ne form, to make the negative, ne pas. If I were to speak French and say je ne sais pas, yeah, it's correct. That's the correct way of saying it. That's
Nobody
the
speaks like
correct,
that.
but nobody speaks like that in France. And if I were to do it, they would look at me like I just arrived on a banana boat. So, no, I mean, but seriously, it's like,
true.
so actually, you
or maybe a little bit stuck up.
Yeah, I
je
mean,
ne sais pas, mais je veux te raconter.
Mais attends un instant là. Mais attends, sais-tu comment vraiment à parler? So I mean, you can try and speak as accurately as possible against the standardized form, but you may end up sounding like a robot, and yeah.
Yep. James Richard, how many languages did you raise your daughter with? Will she appear in one of your videos one day?
So from the beginning, 5 languages: French, Spanish, German, English, and Macedonian. And no, I actually am a firm believer in every individual making their own choices for their own lives, and that goes for my family. So I think that it's not fair for me to impose my life on anyone else. And so yeah, everyone's got the choice to do what they want, and so I've never imposed that on her, and I'm not going to. If she ever decides to do that in the future, that's up to her, but I won't be doing that. Yeah.
Excellent. I cannot answer because I don't have any children
that you know of.
That's true. That's an excellent point. So paper rules, Kindle drools. Okay, YouTube user. That's fine. Okay, let's see. There's so many questions, guys. Thank you for all the great questions. Is AI going to reduce the value of language learning? So maybe AI also translations or robots. Do you think that in 20 years time you can communicate? Well, actually you can already do it. Like you can go to a shop, and I go to a Korean shop. Hey, I speak in Italian, it translates to Korean, and say, hey, talk to the hand or talk to the iPhone. Yeah. So do you think, what is the value of language learning if you can communicate through technology with everyone in the world, no matter where they are, no matter who they are, no matter what the language they speak?
Look, I mean, it helps with very practical things. Let's be fair. It does. It helps technology, but it's not the only reason to learn a language. I mean, learning a language is kind of like doing a Sudoku puzzle. When you buy a Sudoku puzzle book, you actually have all the answers in the back. So if you were to buy that book and you enjoy doing a Sudoku puzzle, are you just going to skip to the back and say, well, there's no point doing any of these Sudoku puzzles because I've got the answers in the back anyway? So you just copy them out or something, I don't know. But you don't get the enjoyment out of it. And the enjoyment and getting, for example, I don't know, understanding how these things fit together is actually, that's the beautiful thing about learning languages. So, being able to be in a situation where you look at a sign and not only do you understand what it means, but you can actually say, oh, well, that word actually comes from this word, and that's influenced that. And those kinds of things and those stories, I don't know if AI is going to be able to do that very quickly anytime soon. But even if it did, would you really want to listen to my phone speaking or me?
I would say that language learning does not only allow you to communicate with the world, it's also very beneficial for your brain. If we delegate everything to the machines, if we delegate, your reply to email, okay, the machine is going to do it for me. The machine is going to speak languages in my stead. What am I going to learn? I always say, is there anything more fun than learning foreign languages? I mean, to me, it's rewarding because it's fun. It's beneficial for my brain. I can get to talk directly to people, not through a machine. So I think even in 20 years time, actually, I think that AI is facilitating technology, translation, and everything else and whatnot is actually facilitating the process of acquiring language. Think about Mezzofanti. Mezzofanti is a very famous Italian polyglot. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Mezzofanti. He learned a bunch of languages, 30, 40, just by listening to prayers. Like this is true story. There's a book that talks about that. It's called Babel No More. I think you invited the author to polyglot conference in New York. And
You're Michael Arad.
Michael Arad. People have been learning languages for centuries. You know, we didn't have iPhone, iPad, or whatever. And I think they learn languages by talking to other people, communicating. So I think this value of communicating and talking to other people is going to be there in 20 years' time or 30 years' time. And you know, if you don't want to learn languages because you're not interested in that, well, then that's fine. But I think that at the end of the day, there's a value in and of itself of learning languages. You know, not just for the sake of languages, but learning languages because it can literally change your life and your brain. This has been my experience. You know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, think about when people brought out calculators, did we stop learning maths? The things, I think there's more to it. I agree with Luca. It's the effect on your brain, and also for neuroplasticity, for you to be able to sort of make these connections and leaps and jumps. There are health benefits, but also it's just a lot more fun. And sometimes you're in places where you can't use technology in the same way. It's not that technology is always there. So imagine in a world where, like, say, everything goes down, what do you do? Or you've got no connectivity, what do you do? You're stuck. And if you're at a table where you want to join in a conversation, you don't really have the time to join in a conversation properly and have your phone going like this to every single person speaking.
Hey,
and whereas if you understand the language, you sometimes hear part of a conversation that somebody else is having at the other side of the table, and you turn your head and you join in with that conversation. And you can't really do that easily with AI at this moment in time. I don't know how you'd have to integrate it into your brain, I think.
To put it bluntly, guys, learn languages. It's going to change your life. So we got a couple of interesting questions here. Again, if you see me, if people have just arrived here, for those who just arrived here, I'm doing this because I can't see that much. I should have worn contact lenses, so I have to take a look. Pričaj Srpski, saludos de Viena. Luca, ¿cuándo vas a hablar Serbian en tu canal? When are you going to speak Serbian in your channel? There's a YouTube video that is coming out in 2 or 3 weeks where I speak Serbian for a little bit, so you're going to see that. What time is the banana boat leaving? I want to get on the topic. not bad. Okay, so what is the biggest difference between each other's language learning methods? This
I'm right and he's wrong. What's the biggest difference?
Where do we start?
I got to share something though. There was
go on.
There was one time we were both speaking at this event. It was attached to the Polyglot Gathering, and we were in Bratislava. Mm-hmm. And Luca and I were both going to speak, and Luca went first. And then Luca sort of talked about all of what he does and stuff, and then he came back, and I just looked at Luca and I said, "I'm just going to get up there and said the opposite of what he said."
So, on a serious note, I think that, and I talk about this in my book, when I met Richard, it was chapter 5. And I talk about the fact that when I met Richard for the first time, I thought that we had a lot of things in common when it comes to learning languages, or when it comes to sitting down and learning languages from scratch and everything else. And I was just explaining my bidirectional translation method. He was looking very serious. And then at the end of it, this was like 15 years ago, I said, look, I don't do any of that. It's just like, so this goes to show, mm-hmm. I think it's, and this is the point I make in that specific chapter, that instead of from my personal experience, instead of thinking about methods, you should think about principles, the principles that successful language learners follow when it comes to learning languages. So imagine you're moving from point A to point B. I had a piece of paper here, but now I wrote a bunch of stuff on it. If you want to move from A to B, let's say A is like 0 scratch, and you want to reach, let's say, B2. So CEFR, Central European Framework for Languages. B2 means, let's say, for the sake of simplicity, it means to speak a language well, to speak a language fluently. There's many paths. There's not just one path. And Richard has a way of learning languages that is very different from mine, because his experience is his path, his approach towards learning is completely different. But at the end of the day, we end up more or less doing the things that are necessary in order to acquire a language.
Yeah.
You know, different order, different approaches, different paths, but the result is the same.
I mean, I've had people I've worked with actually over the years where they've been trying to find a way that works for them, and I've encouraged them to follow Luca's method, even though that might not be exactly as I do it. It doesn't matter. It's what works for them as individuals. I mean, yeah, you know, certain things will excite you or motivate you to continue the learning process, and if that's something more like what I do, or something more like what Luca does, or something more like what somebody else does, you know, it could be anyone. Go for it. Whatever works. I mean, this is the thing. It sounds crazy, but it is whatever works. Some people learn Japanese really well by reading manga. I mean, I've met people who have used language apps and then could actually communicate to a level in the language, and then they started doing other things as well. But so I can't say these things are necessarily bad. That's why I always hesitate when people say, well, do you think it's bad or do you think it's good? Well, it just depends. If it's worked for some people, it's not 100% bad.
My piece of advice is to try as many things as possible, see what works, and readapt, readjust, and keep doing what you like, discard what you don't like. I know this sounds a little bit simplistic, but at the end of the day, this is how we learn languages. Richard knows after, 30 years of learning languages, exactly what works for him. I know what works for me. And the other important thing, and I think this maybe distinguishes polyglots or expert language learners, is that we, or expert language learners, know how to bend and twist their language learning method according to the language they're learning, because no one language is the same, and it has different, obstacles. And I always say that there's a theory according to which languages are more or less all complex in the same way, but they have certain languages have easier features than others, and they have more difficult features than others. For example, it's a stereotype for me, huge stereotype in the language learning world, that English is an easy language. English is not an easy language. Maybe it's an easy language to speak poorly, but when it comes to mastering English, it's one of the most complex languages in the world, especially from a phonetic standpoint, and not only,
Yeah, and also for vocabulary building. I mean, English draws from just very different languages,
hundreds of thousands of
the
words,
roots, just whereas with other languages you might just add a certain type of ending in English, or add a prefix, whereas in English these things are quite irregular very often. And I agree with you, Luca. I think
I'm glad you agree.
Yeah, I do. We agree on a few
we
things.
agree on
something,
not on methods, but a few things.
The ice cream in Italy is amazing. We agree on that.
That's true. Il gelato è fantastico in Italia, ragazzi. Do you think AI is useful in order to practice speaking and writing in a foreign language? Jorge says, I think personally, yes. I've been using, as I said, Lingua over the last 4 weeks. I've been talking about this Lingua that is changing the way I'm practicing speaking. So ChatGPT, I think it's just amazing. You should use it, of course. Use it as much as you want. Again, try things.
Yeah, there are certain languages that these things do better and worse. So, for example, ChatGPT is terrible at Cornish.
I knew you would say that. I was thinking he's going to talk about Cornish.
It has to be said.
He's the only man left on this earth who's learning Cornish. But
do you know there are so many more of us now? If you ever want to learn Cornish, come to me, get in touch, and I'll put you in touch with the right people.
What is the language? What is the most exotic language you're learning right now? Like the language honestly, maybe 5 people speak on the planet, which is great, by the way.
Probably, I mean, at the moment, obviously with Cornish, I've passed all the exams now, so I finished the structured learning of it, but I'm still learning. It never ends. I'm working on the terminology panel as well, but probably Gerrier is pretty unusual.
So what is this language again?
Gerrier is from the island of Jersey. So
Gerrier,
yeah. So
I didn't even know it existed. Gerrier,
yeah. So it's like Norman French.
Okay. Yeah. It's Norman French. Gerrier.
Yeah. So for example, instead of j'habite, say je demeure.
Like je demeure.
Je demeure.
Je demeure.
Je demeure.
Okay.
Je demeure. Je demeure.
Incredible.
Yeah.
You see, this is the only man left on earth who's learning Jiri.
And probably the other Celtic languages, because I started my Celtic language learning project, and I guess they're a
Amazing.
little bit.
Nothing short of amazing. Have you ever attempted to learn Georgian? Alfredo Kuramia says.
Yeah.
This is like
It was-
Japanese.
yeah.
He said, looked at that and said, no.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I love
Beautiful script.
beautiful script. That's the easiest thing about it. Georgian script doesn't take very long to learn, but to actually the grammar and how you put things together is quite complex. So, friend of ours, Stefano, has studied more Georgian, had more success than I have.
Someone
with
had a workshop. He dropped a comment before, but I
Yeah.
couldn't read it to her, because there's so many. But he made a great workshop that got me interested. But it's really difficult. It's a really difficult language. Like when I thought the Russian was difficult, Georgian is way worse, way worse than Russian.
Yeah, the screeds are just
It's
crazy.
just incredible.
I studied it for about a year and a bit at university in Malmö, and after studying at university, even I was still pathetic at it. Really, not very good at all. And part of that is because I never heard the language. Again, if you don't have any contact with it, and this was all a little bit pre-social media when I did this, so it was even harder to try and dig out things in Georgian, except for like a news site. And then trying to make sense of it without, a decent Google Translate or anything was very, very difficult.
Yeah, that's very, very tough.
Yeah.
Very tough. This is more a comment than a question. Random sound and accent with they ain't never gonna happen. Love it. Yeah, you don't know, but behind the scenes, Richard and I, we do all sorts of accents, right?
Mhm.
From all,
Absolutely, Luca.
absolutely.
Absolutely. I love it.
Yeah, this is what we do all the time. There's a lot of things you don't see, obviously, because we show just as a part, and for the rest, we're a little bit crazy. So we go crazy with all the accents across a wide range of languages. But if you want, one day we're gonna do just that. We're gonna change from accent to accent. Sounds a little bit ridiculous to do this accent right now, but
I mean, that could be real fun, Luca. I love it. So yeah.
this is the
Wait, no, I like get the vocal fry really working.
Vocal
there,
fry.
Oh my god.
yeah.
Right?
You did this when we were walking in the park. That was quite something. Anyway, you got a sample of the craziness that that happens here. I think someone said, I think Finnish is related to Inuit. Have you ever tried Inuit to learn Inuit?
No, but no, I don't think so. So Finnish is related to other Finno-Ugric languages. So the other one is, I think it depends which language, whether we're talking about Greenlandic or whatever else. But they're I think polysynthetic languages, whereas Finnish is not polysynthetic in that way.
You should explain what polysynthetic is, but it's a long discussion. We're gonna skip that.
But polyglot, so
we're gonna skip that. Polysynthetic language is also there's a very interesting YouTube video. Actually, there's a channel where you can listen to Navajo. It's very interesting language. It's a polysynthetic language, and the language itself is very peculiar. Anyway, this is just a random thing about polysynthetic languages. Richard, for Acing Life, or Air for Acing Life, asks, Richard, how many of your languages do you use in your daily life? I'm interpreting here, there's a few typos.
Daily life. So I mean, typically, most days I guess I would use 10.
Between 25
10, 15
and
maybe.
30, 10, 15 every
10,
day.
15 most days. Yeah.
Wait, do you use them or do you get exposed to it? Because it's a different matter. Well, one thing is to speak it. One thing is just, I don't know, you listen to the radio randomly in Macedonian, and then you speak to your wife in, I don't know, just an example.
Okay, so actually speaking them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7, I guess, very regularly that I speak. That I actively use.
Which are? People want to know the details.
Obviously,
right?
English. And then, French, Spanish, German, and then Macedonian, Serbian, Bulgarian, and what else? Turkish and Albanian.
So Macedonian with your wife, Spanish and German with your daughter.
So different people. There's an international community as well, obviously in the Balkans. So I get to hear and interact with people in these languages.
But when you say you speak regularly, it means, I don't know, but I'm just asking. It means that you have also designed your life around that. Meaning, I go to the coffee place around the corner and I order stuff in Albanian. I have a conversation in Serbian with the old guys sitting around, I don't know, around the table at the. Is that possible? The piazza, or whatever.
So, for example, with a language like Serbian, because my generation
smelling random stuff here. Sorry.
So don't mind Luca when he gets high on this one.
So what do you say?
This isn't appropriate, Luca. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to a language like Serbian, this is why it's kind of difficult to pin down, because when it comes to a language like Serbian, for example, my generation of Macedonian speakers all speak Serbian, all of them. Znači. I was going to start speaking. So they all speak it. So, for example, if we're having a conversation, we would tell sometimes a story just in Serbian, or tell a joke just in Serbian. We won't translate it. And so, yeah, it's kind of what's speaking and what's kind of just it's incorporated into conversations. And yeah, and I've got friends who speak Bulgarian, so yeah, sometimes I'll be speaking Bulgarian, and sometimes I'll translate if there's kind of something missed from Macedonian to Bulgarian, for example, because yeah, the communication's not 100%. You can have a chat one-on-one is a lot easier than, for example, if you've got one person from the linguistic group coming to a table where the other linguistic group is speaking, and then they will miss certain things. So sometimes you need to sort of explain that.
It's important to stress for Americans, for Australians, and who are watching our show, that certain parts of Europe are very multilingual. And I know you don't have the same privilege in certain parts of the world, but in the Balkans, especially Macedonia, not only Macedonia, you got a possibility of speaking a bunch of languages for cultural and linguistic reasons. So you go to the place, you go to a place around the corner, you speak Turkish, and then you speak Albanian, and then you speak Macedonian, and then Bulgarian, and then so I think this is the amazing thing of living in Europe, is that in certain parts, not everywhere, but if you go to big cities, and in particular in the Balkans, but not only, you get if you also on top of that you design your life around languages in a way, right? Because we create the circumstances to use languages. You get to speak 7, 8, 9, 10 languages on a daily basis. This is Richard is evidence of that. And the other thing I wanted to add is that when people ask me, how do you speak so many languages? How can you maintain so many languages? Well, unless you create the circumstances, it's going to be exceedingly difficult to maintain languages, because I think polyglots, so-called polyglots, learn languages more easily, but they find it difficult to maintain languages unless they create these life circumstances that allow that to happen.
And sometimes that kind of happens. So I was talking about which languages you use naturally and which languages you would learn. And I said about some African languages I looked at, but then hadn't been able to keep going with, or Georgian, for example. But then weirdly, a language like Cornish, which doesn't have that many speakers who would speak it particularly fluently, weirdly, that's become quite a big part of my life. And now I use it online in groups, and at least 5 times a week. And it's a fairly substantial amount of your time to be speaking this language and reading it as well, and interacting with people in this language that I really didn't expect. Sometimes you get surprised by the language that becomes part of your life as well. You kind of open to it, you see how it works, and sometimes it will just enter, and that's it. It's there. And then once that's happened, it's not something you really want to give up, because you have an emotional attachment to the language, to the people who use it, and all that kind of stuff.
I tend to see languages that I learn as parts, like components of members of my family members. Every time there's a new family member that comes, and your family's getting bigger, you don't want to leave anybody behind, and you love everyone, right? So it's part of your life. It's also an integral part of your life. Now, we're not going to talk about how I maintain languages, because we've been talking for 1 hour and a half, and I think we should actually in 20 minutes, because we like talking about this. We could talk about this all night, but we want to be also respectful of your time. I think we're going to speak for 20 more minutes, and then we're going to let you go. I hope you're enjoying this, by the way. So I'm not going to talk about maintaining languages. I'm creating a course about that. I think it's very interesting how to learn multiple languages, how to learn and maintain multiple languages. But, to Richard's point, it's important to create a lifestyle that allows for this to happen, because learning and maintaining languages, it requires a lot of time and energy and commitment. So you have to make it part of your life. Let's take a couple of other questions. Okay, this is an excellent question. Follow-up question. At what point do you think, guys, you're going to stop learning languages? Mohammed asks. For me, the answer is never. It's an ongoing thing. I think I'm going to learn languages as long as I'm alive, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I think as long as I'm physically able to do it, then yeah, I will.
Yeah. So it's just too beautiful. It's just too much fun. It's too much fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the thing, right? Is that even if you're kind of just speaking to somebody who's not studied languages before, you're always learning something. So I mean, I found that some things kids say, or some things that people say who haven't even studied languages, they will teach me something about a language or languages that make spark an idea, or they tell me something just directly that they know that I hadn't even thought of.
Another question by Maria in that vein. Thoughts on learning a useless, quote unquote, language just for passion? No friends and rarely visit the country. Maria, maybe we're not around, but we're talking about the fact that Richard in particular learns very exotic languages, or I don't even know if exotic is the right term. It's like languages that are not spoken by a lot of people, and there's a reason why, right?
Yeah, I mean, so it can be a heritage thing. So for me, my heritage language is Welsh. And so I had Welsh words in my English growing up, but then I went back and actually learned the Welsh language to be able to communicate in Welsh. And for me, that was an important thing. And during the pandemic, I started learning Cornish. And Cornish, again, I've never been to Cornwall, oddly. And I just got into the language because a friend of mine wanted to do this course online. And I said, I'll keep you company. And here I am nearly 5 years later, still using it, found lots of new friends through it, and just really, really love the language. I love what they do. In fact, I was in Taipei recently at a linguistics department talking about the Cornish revival movement and how that as a template could work for other indigenous languages around the world. So it's to that point that it has an effect sometimes on your life.
Excellent answer. Would you ever do a video where you go into shops or international markets and speak to people in different languages, like the late Lao Shu? They're the most wholesome type of videos. Before I reply to that, Richard and I are recording a couple of videos tomorrow. If you have some more questions that you want us to address, because it's going to be a long form interview between me and him, I want to pick his brain about language learning and more stuff. Here's your time. You got 20 minutes to write all the questions. We're going to take a look at them after, well, not tonight, but
on the morrow.
Yes, exactly. First thing in the morning. So Lao Shu, but for those who don't know, Lao Shu is a polyglot. He used to make videos. He unfortunately passed away, I think 3 years ago, something like that. A lot of people has asked me about why I've never made videos of me walking down the street and talking to everyone. They're pretty popular. I gotta tell you the truth. It never really interested me in doing that, because when I am on the street interacting with people, I enjoy doing that rather than just using a camera and kind of destroying the pleasure of communicating with people. This has been my experience. If you want, we can, maybe Richard is leaving tomorrow, unfortunately, but next time, if Richard is in Rome, we can go around asking people random questions. I don't know the interest in that. If you think it's something that you can find inspiring, we can do that. I've personally never done that. I don't know if you have done that. It's not my thing. It's not my style, but maybe, if you like it, why not? We can give it a try.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lao Shu, for me, Moses McCormick, was somebody who was just a very inspiring person in terms of getting out there, not being afraid, being very fearless. And he went beyond the language thing. So, I mean, let's just give his context, okay? Because this is, a Black American guy who is very tall, very, very tall, going into places where people had moved to the United States and speaking their languages. And if you've not seen any of the videos, you'll see in a lot of the videos that they're kind of looking, oh, what's going to happen here? What's going on? And then because he's so nice, he breaks down all those barriers, and he was such a gentle person. So whenever you hear him speak, or he's just very, very nice guy. And so what he did, I think, was authentic to him. And me trying to emulate that could feel inauthentic to me, but also to people watching. I think that everyone has to find their path. And for me personally, with my language learning, I think because I live in, and like Luca said, we live in very different contexts. And my context, and I think for Luca as well, where he's been to different countries and spent months at a time, actually the opposite is what you want. So what I want personally is to be able to go in, have a conversation with someone, and it's just a conversation, and nothing's even mentioned about me being somebody who learnt the language. It's just a tool for communication. We have a conversation, we talk about things, and I learn things that I wouldn't necessarily learn from books or from teachers. It's just things that people who use the language say and what they do, and observing that. But me being somebody who's come from outside doing it is not the focus. So I've never personally felt that was the authentic me. At the same time, I'm glad that there are people out there, and there have been people out there like Moses who have done that kind of thing, because I think we need to have people who will appeal to lots of different audiences and represent the plethora of different personality types and facets of different people's personalities, so that everyone feels represented.
To Richard's point, I would say that when I watched Moses' videos, even if Moses' style is not, very different people, very different approaches, very different styles, every time I watched a video of his, whether it was a video about him walking down the street or talking to people in the mall, or learning or showing things, like even teaching languages was inspiring for me. I felt like pumped up and I wanted to learn languages. I think that's a value, is that everyone is different. Everybody has got something to offer. And I believe that all this, I wouldn't call it charade, all this stuff that, fake polyglot, you're a fake polyglot, who cares, right? Just like if someone wants to share their love for languages, that's great. And one more thing I wanted to say about fake polyglots and the point that people say, for example, well, we have to point fingers at these people who are selling courses and making money out of people's gullibility. You say gullible? People being gullible. I would just say, well, you got the refund stuff. If you don't like something, you get a refund and then you move on. I think it's everyone's right and duty to get informed, get educated about stuff. You like Richard, you follow his course. You like Luca, you follow his course. You don't like it, you move and find something that works for you. But there's a lot of negative stuff within the, not just I think language learning community or the polyglot community, but on YouTube in particular, there's this thing that unless you speak 10 languages perfectly, then you're a fake polyglot. I think it's a useless thing, just like
it's very arbitrary. I find the discussion kind of almost, no, for me it's not a discussion that I typically would indulge in. I did make a video, I had a live about it once, and talked about my thoughts.
I remember that live
on fake polyglots. But look, I mean, who are you kidding? Even if somebody is or isn't, look, who I am, for example, in your heads, in each one of your heads, will be a different version of who I am and who I think I am. And I have no rights to your perception of me. I have no rights to your thoughts. I stop where my nose ends, and that's kind of the way I see it. So fake, not fake, real, not real. Speaks a language, doesn't speak a language. So normally when people say, well, do you speak this language? And I say, well, I let you be the judge of that. If you think I do, then great. If you think I don't, then also great.
Fair enough, and great point. Okay, one last question, and we end the conversation on a philosophical note. We partially already addressed this, but we're gonna, conclude this episode, this live show, with this question, and then I'm going to give you a couple of links. We're going to talk about a couple of final links about Richard's coaching, my coaching. Richard, where do you find the motivation to keep learning so many languages? I think this was a question that was asked before, but I want to go back to this, whether I read it before or not. I will answer. I will let Richard answer, and then we'll wrap things up. I learn languages to live a better life. It's as simple as that. If I think about an alternative future where I hadn't learned any language, were a monolingual, it would not be the same life. It would be much poorer. Languages have brought about major changes, not only in terms of work, because I work with languages, I teach languages, etc., but in terms of the overall understanding of how the world works. Now, this might sound philosophical, that sounds a little bit strange, but really, when you have a cultural understanding through the language glass, so to speak, you see things that most people do not see. Now, it's difficult for me to translate this into words, but I'm pretty sure you understand what I mean. It's just like you understand people's reactions. You are also more understanding of others. I believe that, there's a lot of conflicts also because people don't understand each other, and we're all the same. I know this sounds very trivial. Human beings are all the same, no matter which language they speak. But when they speak a different language that sounds very exotic, we tend to think these people are different from us. They're very much the same. They experience the same emotions, the same things. So when someone tells me, Luca, and this is a very common thing, oh, why don't you just learn English and move on because English is the only language you have to learn. It's just like, when you point to the moon or like the galaxy there, and the person is just looking at the finger instead of looking at the galaxy or the moon far, far beyond and far away. So my answer is always learning languages has completely changed my life, as not just in terms of the physical things or the job but also in terms of an individual, a citizen of the world. I know it sounds trivial, but it's really true. And when you learn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 languages, you'll be able to experience it. It's an amazing feeling.
For me, it's seeing the world differently. So there are 2 analogies I can give you. The first one is, if you've ever seen a picture of a flower and then you see what that flower looks like for a dog, a cat, a bird, a bee, and the colors are all different. Imagine each language you learn, you see the different version of the same picture. And when you're learning languages, it's because the word, for example, for the flower might have a different connotation. It might be used in different ways of expressing yourself in the language. It might give a different feeling in one language compared to another. So these kinds of things just enrich. Whenever you see that object in the future, you will also think of all of these different words and all of these different feelings and all of these different versions and varieties of almost the same thing. And if you imagine that multiplied by pretty much everything you see and do, it just shows you how beautiful the world can be. And the second analogy that I will give you would be, I see languages as a map of the world. And the map represents the forests, it represents the streams, it represents the mountains, it represents where people live, buildings, houses, cottages, animals, you name it, everything, right? And you're given this picture as a jigsaw puzzle. And this jigsaw puzzle is all broken up in pieces and it's in its box. As you learn the language, you start to take out the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. First of all, with the language or languages that you learn in your immediate environment, whether that's at home, school, whatever. And you fill in what you can. And then you start learning some maybe languages that have come into contact with your culture or cultures. And then you start to see how you can add actually little bits of this jigsaw puzzle to these pictures to show and highlight a picture. And that picture becomes more beautiful because you've got more detail. And then you can see how it interreacts and interlaces with other parts of the picture. And how can you stop adding pieces of the jigsaw puzzle to make the full picture? The really weird thing is that I know and I accept that I will never add all the pieces. But it's fun trying.
Beautiful. Bravo. Okay, so we are ending on this very philosophical note. One more time, I'm just going to share the link. Let me get this here. Let me show you if this works. Richard gives lessons. It's not just about, it's language therapy, it's psychology. It's also, you can help parents who want to raise multilingual children. I think you've done a workshop in Moscow about that. He's very experienced in this, obviously. So if anybody has multilingual children, if you're interested in that specific service, but not only, mainly probably language therapy, understanding. I think I really like the concept of language therapy because the psychological aspect of language learning is huge. And they never talk about this in school. If you think about it, at least in Italy, but I think it's the same thing across the entire globe. You don't go to a language class, just like maybe you're 6, you go to elementary school and they say, oh, let's learn English. You don't know why you're learning English, and they don't talk at all about the psychology of learning, right? Which is really important because in my language learning career as a coach, I think that most problems that relate to language learning are not technical. They're more emotional. Like learning a skill, any skill for that matter, is an emotional pursuit. Technical too, but I think it's more emotional than technical. I
mean, I think of it in this way. Look, people will think very commonly of they want to go and get fit, or they want to lose weight, or they want to, whatever you want to do in life. You want to stop smoking, or you want to stop drinking, or whatever it is. What do people do? Well, you go to somebody who's going to help to give you advice on how to do that and the steps to take. But why don't we do that with language? And why do we allow ourselves to just rely on things that we don't know necessarily what we've tried, what we can try, how it fits in with how our actual individual lifestyle is?
Absolutely correct. And if you like this live, we can make others, because Richard, even if he's not going to be physically here, he's leaving tomorrow, we can always do this from his place. And there's more things that we're concocting and preparing for the school, just in case you're interested. For example, did you want to be in a group coach with us? Think about that. If you like the idea, let me know. You can send me a message. You can go to lucalampariello.com. I'm just going to write it here. And you can let me know if the idea piques your interest. Like, hey, I want to be coached by Luca and Richard, or Richard and Luca within a group class. And we're going to talk about, some stuff that we talked about today, but much more in detail, obviously, because today you were asking a lot of questions. And I'm sorry if I did not address all of the questions, but we have literally hundreds and hundreds of questions, and we could address just the ones we've seen. Unfortunately, time is limited. And we stretched this over 2 hours. So because I see that more and more people were coming and were interested in this. So I hope you liked it. And we get our roommate. Thank you guys for the amazing conversation. Thank you, Desh. Last question: has Richard Simcott written any books on language learning, especially for autodidacts?
Not yet.
But it's coming sooner than later. Sooner rather than later, it's coming. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Have a fantastic, morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you find yourself on the this beautiful planet. Thank you. Check Richard's, coaching services if you're interested, and go to the website and ask and let me know if you're possibly interested in an idea of the group coach with me and Richard. That's it for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you everyone for your questions and for spending time with us. Really appreciate it.
Hugs and kisses from beautiful Rome. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.